In 2010, I had a rough period in my personal life. I didn't know exactly the path that I'm going to go with. I was doing photography professionally for only 1 year. I started in 2009, but I wasn't sure on the road that I was going to take. And those personal problems affected the way I was treating my business, my photography, and actually my entire life. In that year, something happened to me, and it was a moment of self discovery. It was a foggy day, it was autumn, it was cold. I had my camera with me, and I was simply wandering through the town. I noticed that there was fog in the forest, and it's close to me, and I started walking into that forest. And at a certain moment, I picked up the camera and started to photograph those foggy landscapes. I don't know why, but at a certain point, I remember that I stopped and realized that after a long time of feeling bad, now I was feeling okay. It was the starting point of my entire journey as a landscape photographer. That moment gave me so much joy and so much peace that I continue to come back to forests every time that I had a chance to. Starting from 2010, I began to develop this series of photos, which is called Stories of the Forest. And that is the best of my entire work as a landscape photographer. Now, I had 15 years to work on the techniques that I'm using when I'm photographing inside the forest. It would be difficult to cover all the techniques in one video, but maybe if you're interested in my editing techniques, you can go on my website. I have a editing short course on specifically on foggy forests, and I also have a photo tour if you're interested that explores the foggy forests where I go. Now, I want to share with you some of the secrets that stay behind creating beautiful forest photography. It doesn't matter the fact that I have a different motivation or a much more powerful motivation. The images should look okay and beautiful no matter what. For me, this exploration of the forest in terms of photography lies specifically in those stories that my grandmother was reading me when I was a child. And it's kind of like a tribute to those first 6 years of my life. I will give you 5 short but useful, I think much more useful than other tips about forest photography. And at the end, I will also share with you the lens that I'm using to photograph these forests. The first thing that it's very, very important, it's the type of forest you're photographing. Remember that pine trees don't look okay in these photos. And I think it's because the multitude of details in those trees. And then you need trees that are not necessarily straight, but they are arranged in a certain way. Now, also don't go for inclined forests. They don't look okay. Search for forests that have areas of flat surfaces, not necessarily plains because you have trees, but having a flat surface, it's really important. After that, the conditions in where you photograph are extremely important. I mean, if you're going during the day, expect to see some things that are not that beautiful. So you need good light. Of course, that sunrise and sunset look okay in the forest, but the best conditions to photograph the forest, in my personal opinion, is foggy days. And the reason for that is because fog, first of all, simplifies the landscape. The forest is it's the basic definition of pure chaos and clutter, and everything that is in front of you draws attention. So if you need to focus the attention of the viewer, you need something to get all that chaos away. And of course, that fog helps a lot with this. There are moments when fog is more present: spring, autumn, when it rains, after the rain. That's why I have a really huge umbrella and I'm standing in the forest while it's raining. And when the rain is over, sometimes you get a little fog, a little rays of light. Another moment would be during winter when there are changes in temperature. So I have a website where I check the dew point to see exactly when I'm going to get fog or not in my area. So following foggy days in the forest, I think it's one way to have a successful photo. Now, depending on how much fog is in the forest, you need to position yourself in a certain way. There are days when the fog is really thick and days when the fog is not that thick. When it's not that thick, you should look for rays of light. If you look towards the sun, you have a good chance to have those rays of light. But when the fog is really thick, you need to position yourself in such a way that you have closer elements to you that are visible. You don't want to photograph only silhouettes of the forest. You need something to introduce the viewer to the photo and to let him or her explore the image. And I think the reason for which these photos look that good is because you can't see everything in the distance, and your brain, depending on your visual experience and your visual development, your brain will start to fill in the blanks. So if you're a person that likes fantasy, for example, you'll probably see a magical forest in front of you. Another very important thing is to look for areas in the forest where the light kind of enters into the forest. There are areas where there are not growing that much trees. Maybe a tree has fallen and there's a gap in the foliage of the forest. So a little bit of light enters into the forest. Now you need to photograph into that light, towards that light. You need to position yourself in an area of darkness and photograph towards light. It's extremely important for you to do that because you will get a natural visual voyage of the viewer through the photo, because people are naturally drawn to light. It also depends on the editing you're doing, but as I said, if you're interested in my editing techniques specifically for foggy forests, you can go on my website. I have a short course specifically on that. Now, in terms of the gear that I'm using, I prefer using a full frame body. When you're photographing fog, you need a good dynamic range in the sensor of the camera, because you will get areas of darkness, areas with really small details or fine details that don't have that much contrast. So you need all the information in the sensor to get the details that you really want. In terms of lens, I think this is my personal preference. I'm using only one lens when I'm entering the forest. One lens every time I enter the forest. It's the same lens from 2010. I bought this lens in 2009 or 8. I can't remember exactly. It's a 24-105 Canon L lens. f4 image stabilized. Now, while I'm using this lens on a tripod, of course, I turn the image stabilization off. I don't need it. I always have a circular polarizer mounted on this lens. It doesn't matter if it's a foggy day or it's a sunrise or sunset. Inside the forest, you will always be able to see the results of a polarizer if you're rotating it. So this is my perfect gear to photograph forests. Now, I hope this video was useful to you and I inspired you to go and photograph forests. Now, if you want to photograph forests with me, you can check my website. I have a photo tour over there that you can join. But until we see each other, keep on photographing because it's the only way that you can get better. Thanks for watching and bye-bye.